Greetings, friends. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm super thrilled to be here with you guys and to present these fabulous guests with you. But before I introduce these rock stars, let me make some announcements. First things first, the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on Spotify and all of the main social media platforms. So if you're looking to find them on social media, my social media platforms, Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. TikTok is Dr. India White. I also invite you to check out the website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, or to schedule me for any speaking or coaching events. I know we're just starting the school year, so we have a lot of exciting things going on. I see people are doing some grit trainings, and thank you so much for those that have welcomed and embraced the message of grit. You understand that everybody needs grit. It's starting to make sense. Speaking of events, I want to also remind you guys I will be seeing some of you at these conferences. I know we have the Math Ed conference coming up, the virtual conference coming up. Thank you to Melanie and the team for that. I will be speaking. It's already pretty much going to be launched next month, but my portion will be October, beginning of October. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys there. I also look forward to seeing you all at NCSM and NCTM this year, those wonderful conferences. I'm super excited about the Making Math Moments Conference and the Black Kids Love Math Summit in November. I'm thrilled about these events and anything else that comes up in between. I also want to remind you guys to check out the Grit Mini Workshop titled How to Harness Grit to Help Students Thrive. That is going to be with Robert Kaplinski and the Tribe. Thank you, Robert, for this fabulous opportunity. Also, we have online tutoring going on. I know we are busy, so online tutoring going on. If you have any students that need tutoring, send them our way, and we will help them. So with that said, now, I hope you guys have had gritty weeks. I hope that you're getting a lot of things done. I do now want to take this opportunity to introduce to this Let's Get Gritty podcast two fabulous people. One is going to be Fred Bridges, who is a growth mindset coach, and Alexander Rivera, a recent graduate from Hillsborough County Schools, advocating and championing the work for students across this nation. So welcome, guys. How's it going? Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast.
Going well. Awesome to be here.
Yes, I'm
glad to be here as well.
Okay, so of course, this is wonderful because we're all going to be talking about grit and just your experiences with grit. Alexander is going to be talking to the audience about student perspectives of grit, and Fred is going to be talking to us about grit as a growth mindset coach, as an educator, and whatnot. So with that said, I want Alexander to first introduce yourself to us.
My name is Alexander Rivera. I am a proud public education activist based here in Tampa, Florida, and a recent high school graduate of Wharton High School, located just north of Tampa. I began my educational activism around the age of 14 years old. So I've been doing this for a pretty long time, but just recently, over the summer break, I was fortunate enough to go with Dr. White to the Florida Council of Teachers of Mathematics Conference in Orlando, where I had a chance to share my story of activism and, to inspire not just educators, but students around the nation to know that you are, that you have to stay gritty if you want to make a change in your school. So with that being said, I thank you again, India, again for having me.
Oh, definitely. It's my honor. And I can't wait to see what the next chapter holds. So we celebrated you last time on the show because you had just graduated from Hillsborough County, and you talked about how you were so gritty, how you overcame depression and things. And just for, the audience sake, I want you to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to transition into the next rock star on the show. So talk about that, like your grit journey and how grit helped you towards the end as you were graduating.
So, my grit journey began at a very young age. As I said before, I began my activism at 14 years old, and during which time, you got to understand this is during COVID. So, you're on lockdown, you're doing, Zooms like how we're doing right now, just, very much remote work. And, it ultimately it changed my life altogether because I was diagnosed with depression at the age of 16. And then, by the time I turned 18, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. So a lot of my time was, evolved around, between therapist appointments and doing Zooms with my teachers. And so my advocacy basically started after, I had found out that one of my friends was being bullied. And I said, well, if you can change anything about it, what would it be? He's like, I would like to have somebody to be on my side because, he was, struggling. And so I am what most people call a team player. What I mean by that is that I am, somebody who wants to not just fight for somebody who is struggling, but somebody who is also, needing that little bit of that push or that motivation that they need. And so that really, prompted me into making some serious policy decisions. What I mean by policy decisions is being able to reach out to a region superintendent because obviously it was not being addressed with my current administration. So I said, you know what? Let me take this up a little bit higher than I should. So I reached out to my superintendent, and of course, ultimately what ended up, being the deal breaker was, he actually, my one of my friends came up to me and he's like, you do such great work when it comes to activism. Maybe you had to become a public education activist. And so that's how I got my start was, it's something from a little issue as simple as bullying. And it was able to be addressed. And, as of right now, he is currently a prospective student at Columbia Law School. So I'm very proud of him for that.
Fabulous. And thank you for your work. Look at that impact you're already making as a student. Okay, so now I wanna bring on the next rock star, Fred Bridges, a growth mindset coach. Now, Fred, where are you based? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I am based out of the great state of Georgia. Some might call the city closest to me Hotlanta. It's pretty rainy today, so it's not as hot. But yeah, there are some days when it could really be Hotlanta. But guys, I am I love the theme of grit, and as the other podcast participant was speaking. I'm sorry, I forgot your name, sir.
Alexander.
Alexander. So
Yeah.
okay. So what Alexander was saying, man, I was putting myself back into school also because when I was up until the third grade, I stuttered so bad that nobody could really understand what I was saying.
Yeah.
But I was blessed to be born with a twin brother. And so it was kind of like Moses and Aaron. If you know that story, my brother became my mouthpiece until the point where I got my own voice. And the way that I found my voice, guys, is that I was so embarrassed to go outside and play with everybody else. I sat inside and just sat in front of the TV and just tried to just mouth my way through commercials. And so once I got my confidence with commercials, we would be out somewhere and I would like blurt out like this, it's Mikey. He likes it. He likes it. And so until I got my voice, guys, I kind of spoke in commercials. But once I found my voice, I said, hey, I don't want any other young person to struggle with the embarrassment of not being able to express yourself. And so once I started talking, my mama said my mouth never stopped. And so and so I became a speaker at programs. I became a speaker in the community. I became a voice for the voiceless because just like we just heard, man, there are kids that get picked on so much, right? Because of their challenges. And so from the time I gained my voice to the time I started teaching, I tried to find the kids that needed somebody to be on their team. I love the fact that you said that you're a team player. And I think to be gritty, man, you gotta be like a team player.
Absolutely.
you
You
know,
have to.
and so once I realized what I had, my superpower as a teacher, I was that teacher that every kid that was called any type of name could be found in my classroom during lunchtime, right? Because you know what happens during lunch to those kids, right? And I opened my classroom up, and I promise you, every kid that again had any challenges, I mean, I really felt like I had another class that they didn't tell me about, but it was so awesome during education to again assist those kids and really understand the power of a great educator beyond the curriculum that you teach, the grit that I model. So many of my kids took with them, even those kids that were just my lunch bunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see those kids growing up into beautiful adults with thriving lives. And I just wonder, if I close my door and push those kids out, where would they have been? What would have happened? And so I've always seen the benefit of being that advocate, right? And just being determined to make sure that life is good for as many of us as we can. And so I took that from K-12 and moved it into sales, and then moved it into another special project that I created dealing with the healthcare industry. Do you understand how much the healthcare industry pours into everyone else to take care of them, and very little is poured back? And so, out of those three areas, that is where I continue to serve with training, with support, with coaching. And it has been a wonderful journey. I've met some great people like Dr. White. And so that's my story. And I'm just excited to be sharing that with you.
Well, that is fabulous. And I kind of want to see you guys, as far as you and Alexander, if you had any words for Alexander, because Alexander also desires to be, in the speaking, circuit. And I think he would do a fabulous job. And you also have done speaking. And so I kind of want to see what words would you give him about building his grit, being motivated no matter what, and how to put himself out there.
Yo, Alexander, man, the one thing that I have consistently heard from great speakers and people that are really causing a change in this world, you are enough. If you can believe that what you've got in you and your experiences are enough to touch the ears and touch the hearts and touch the minds of those that you are trying to reach, man, you're going to always have an audience. Even if it's people on the front row that are sitting on their phones, there's somebody in the back that couldn't get to the front, that I promise you, in that audience, they're going to come up to you and say, what you said today touched my life. And even if it's one person out of 1,000 people, and Dr. White, I know she talks to thousands of groups, sizes of groups, but man, if you're in a room and you've got one person that shows up for your session, you are enough for that person, and you give them everything like you would if it was 1,000 people. So that's what I would share.
That's so powerful. Alexander, did you have any questions for this mindset coach, Fred, the growth mindset coach, and about how to build grit or anything else? Do you have any questions for him?
I wouldn't say I have more of questions. I would say I have more of a statement, if I may.
Go for it.
First off, Mr. Bridges, I applaud you for your advocacy as well, because it's not easy, especially in this day and age, being an advocate. But what I've grown to terms with what you're saying is, because when I was, in high school, one of the things that I would often do is every morning as I was getting ready for school. I don't know if you guys know the motivational speaker Eric Thomas.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, E.T. Yes,
Every
love it.
single morning, from the time that I would wake up to the time that I would go to bed, and when I was struggling with my depression, I would sit in my room like I'm right now. I would sit in my room, I would be on my laptop, I would do my courses, and I would just listen to what he had to say. Because aside from what India was motivating me to do, aside from what my godmother was inspiring me to do, had it not would have been for Eric Thomas and all these, wonderful people to be, really, touch into the, to the, what I call nuggets of wisdom.
Yes.
What I enjoy about that is that, when I was, when I was in my senior year, obviously I was, falling a little behind, and I was, going down a very, I would say, a dark path. I would say a bump in the road, because, as somebody who had depression, somebody who was facing severe, anxiety, and, my sister as well, dropped out her senior year. And I told her, I said, listen, I said, Elizabeth, we really got to, work together to get this done, because ultimately our lives depend on it. You talk about how you want to be an engineer and you want to be gritty and, having all these things. Well, let's go back and get our degree. Let's go back and get our diploma. And so she did. And, she actually, we applied in August. Of course, we got enrolled. By December, this girl was finished. And I was like, okay, first off, are you talking about my sister Elizabeth, like the one that's sitting right beside me, Elizabeth? Because I was, it was really compelling, that she persevered, like literally. I'm surprised she's not on this episode, telling her life story as well, because her story and I are, we were raised by a single parent, and I can understand the struggles that single parents face because I am a product of a single parent enough to know. But what you know Eric Thomas, like I said, in the morning I'd wake up, I'd sit in my dining room, I'd be drinking a cup of coffee, reading the newspaper, and I would listen to Eric Thomas. And I was like, okay, this is today's motivation. And I would use that motivation along with Dr. White's advice and the advice of several others. And I persevered. And yes, there was slight bumps in the road. But at the end, come July 23rd of this year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to walk across that stage. And I did. And now I'm going to school to be a teacher. And I applaud Dr. White for that. And as well as you, I really do think that, it's all about, teamwork. That's what makes a difference. As long as you have teamwork and you have a great deal amount of courage and motivation, you can do anything.
That is so fabulous. Isn't that awesome?
That is. I'm telling you that you've got something in you that I promise you, those kids that walk into your class are gonna get more than they signed up for the course, my brother. So I'm gonna be checking in on you through Dr. White, and man, just continue to serve our kids. Our children need more than a grade. And I'm telling you, anybody that says all you're there to do is to give them a grade, they are missing it, my friend. If you have decided to give your life and career to education, man, you are headed to the front lines. And brother, it sounds like you're ready for it. You're listening to ET. Hey, that's my dog. Hey, what did he say? That's my dog right there, man.
Yeah,
Hey.
And I tell you what though, there's a quote that I don't know if you guys know who Angela Bassett is. I'm pretty sure you guys do. You see her all the time on on TV. There's a quote that she said when she got her Oscar. It's she said that not only am I not good enough, I am more than enough. And that is what it really empowers me, because here's the thing though, whenever I started my advocacy journey, I really thought to myself, okay, I don't know if there's people out there listening to my story. And then when I came on to, the first episode that I did, I was a freshman in high school. Mind you, I was 15. So Dr. White practically watched me grow up over the last 5 years. And by the way, I'm not cutting onions, so let's not cry. But long story short, she really has been the embodiment and really the main center of my activism. And it starts off with peer-to-peer coaching. When I came to her and I told her, I said, hey, listen, can you pray for me, because I'm, battling depression. Not only am I, somewhat coming out of my depression, but also she gives great advice. She's a very straightforward person, tells you like it is. As a mom to a son, she's very much involved, and and I applaud all the work that she does. And it's not easy, especially for me, but when I went to FCTM, which is probably one of the biggest math events here in the state of Florida, specifically for math educators, and when you're able to stand in front of a room of, I think it was like 20 people, I had educators who were lined up literally after the end of her session, lined up to talk with me, and they're like, how do you do it? You're only 18 years old. I said, well, I'm actually 19, but I thank you for, degrading me down in age. But, hey, listen, and, I even told one of my friends, I said, I want to be an educator because out of all the careers, education is where I'm at, because we need educators. There's a nationwide shortage. It can be, proven through stats, but what we can't argue is the fact that we as teachers have to understand that, we need to motivate our students. We have to be, their, voice, especially, in a society where, students are often seen but not heard.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we have to make sure that our students are heard. We got to make sure that our teachers are heard. And, and that's where I got my start, was through Dr. White's activism. And I was kind of like, that little gator, trying to go into a river. There's a little UF reference that I give, but,
Okay.
you got it. So I thoroughly enjoy being an advocate. And my brother's a school teacher because of it. I spent, 15 years as a pharmacist, and it was like, you know what? Pharmacy's not it. So he went back, got his bachelor's degree at 30, and is now teaching third grade math and science.
Awesome.
This is amazing. So this makes me ask both of you a question, and I want to start with you, Coach Fred. How has focusing on grit help you with a growth mindset?
Oh, wow. I will tell you that I was not able to having a grandmother like I had. My mom's mom was probably one of the grittiest ladies that
Oh
you
yeah.
know that I can imagine, and so she would not allow us to say what we were not good at.
Mm,
She would not allow us to accept. I mean, she would not accept that we couldn't do something.
right.
And so having that lady in my ear in my house,
Mm.
I'm at her table sometimes doing my homework, and I'm getting so frustrated, and I want to say I can't do it, but if I open my mouth
Ah,
and said that I would let that lady down. So having a village that defined for me real early that we don't say what we can't do. You will get the help that you need to do anything that you need to do, and we're gonna make a sacrifice for you. And so having that at an early age, even with the stuttering, right? Like I could have went in my room and put my head in my pillow, but somebody said, "Hey, just put the boy in front of a TV and just let him try to mouth out these commercials, right?" And so at an early age, having that village that supported the ability to practice that grit gave me a runway. So when I took off like a 747, and embraced that growth mindset, when I came across Carol Dweck's work,
yes.
I felt like somebody who had found the Bible again, right? She was
Exactly.
she was speaking a language that I could understand.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing. And obviously, you're still gritty and you're making your grit moves today, right? And I think it's imperative. We need to have you more on more stages and coaching more. Definitely for sure, because you have the Alexanders that are behind you that are, watching and that they have to eventually follow your footsteps. So, Alexander, I want you now to ask or to answer that same question that I just asked Coach Fred, where I asked about how has focusing on grit help you with your growth mindset.
First off, I completely agree with with what Fred was saying, because ultimately, when I think of grit, I think of a great deal amount of courage. And you have to not just stand by your convictions, but also understand that there was a saying a long time ago that my godmother used to say, which was, never give up on your dreams, because you'll never know when that dream is realized. So what I think about that, and given how I battled depression, I thought I was alone in this. I really did. I thought, I was, it was me against God and me against the world at that point. I was like, okay, everybody's against me. Everybody's, having their own opinion about me. And, somebody very wise once told me, who cares what people think? You are your own person. And so that for me was a sign saying, okay, maybe I need to talk with God or talk with my pastor about this. And so one afternoon, and this was before I had even graduated, I was actually, I had a very almost breakdown, because I was like, I'm almost to the finish line. Do I have the strength to get it done? And I remember my pastor and I were speaking after Sunday service, and I told him, I said, Pastor, I said, thank you for the sermon. It's just that, I have a lot on my mind. And I didn't think he had any intent to listen. That's my opinion. I didn't think, he would listen. But his, he was like, okay. And so me and him sat down, and for 30 minutes, was telling me, look, you got to get it done, and it all starts with motivation. If you have the motivation to have grit, then you can do anything. And as I said before, during the FCTM, is that, when I was, struggling, like deep rooted struggling, and I was down at the bottom of the pit, I thought, like somebody's throwing me the rope and I'm trying to climb up, and it's like, depression is like a demon and it's trying to hold you back from doing what you want to do. So I was like, okay, I want to reach to the top of the mountain. And so I was like, but to answer your question, I think that it's important to realize that you have to stand by your convictions, especially given, given an example of, the fact that there is so much more that I can give that people, oftentimes don't realize is that, but I can, I honestly feel that in my heart, given the fact that I am an well, not an educator, future educator, what I can say from this standpoint is that as long as you remain, there's a saying, you got to be in it to win it. Like as a football, my brother's a football coach, so he often tells his football players, if you want to go out there and you want to achieve a victory, all you have to do is, make sure that you have the mindset, that you have to understand that, I wouldn't say it's like a lifeline issue because it's not the NFL, but um, he encourages his players. He teaches both high school football and he coaches my nephew's little league team. So he really motivates his players to know that whatever you're going through in life, you will overachieve, and when you overachieve, you will succeed.
Now that leads me to ask you another question because I think that's fabulous. Uh, about overachieving and things, but sometimes, Alexander, we find that our self-efficacy, like our ability to believe in ourselves, not this false narcissistic, puffed up, inflated ego, but more of a true um, soul like belief within ourselves, that can be damaged at times because of what you go through in life. And so I want you now to talk to the audience about how has grit impacted your self-efficacy, your belief to believe in your ability to achieve in life.
Well, I think that, as I said before, India, grit basically means you have to have a great deal amount of courage. And I think that the biggest, thing that I did was, overcoming my depression. And, obviously I was, as I said before, I was just one of those people who, would, I was, don't get me wrong, a nerd. I'm not afraid to say it. I was a nerd.
I was
It's
too.
okay.
And so,
Nerds become
and it
leaders.
was, what I loved about it was, my brother, who was actually going to school to be a teacher, he was actually in his last internship at USF, University of South Florida, down in Tampa. He had asked me. He said, "Well, and he actually used me as like, as an example in a way, in the sense meaning that to take somebody who was battling depression and turn it into something, the saying, turn lemons into lemonade, and lemonade, I don't know the actual euphemism or whatever it's called, but what I remember is how he told me, because one of the classes he had to take was, intro to the teaching profession, and he asked me, he's like, well, if you had one change to make with your life, what would it be? And I told him, I said, if I had to change anything, it would probably be my depression and, get rid of that. Obviously, I can't get rid of it. It's, cemented with me, but, I don't let. And it's like, well, there's something I want to tell you. Do not let depression define your life.
Mm.
That's number one. Do not ever let depression, get in the way of what you want to enjoy in life. If you are being called to serve, whether it's in politics, whether if it's in the education space, whatever field you choose to do in life, just remember that you can do anything as long as you put your mind to it. And so I thought, and I told my mom the same thing. And my mom's 53 years old, and I love her to death. And she is also persevering through grit. You got to think, she's working 2 full-time jobs and going to college full time.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's, she harnesses grit, and by believing in your beliefs and by believing in the ability that you can do anything, you can accomplish many great things. I mean, I know that, perfect example I can give, Dr. White, when you were going through your dissertation, it was obviously very challenging because it's a PhD, but you were able to harness grit, and you were like, okay, God's got my back 24/7. He's never afraid to answer that call when I need him. And so when you harnessed grit, and I saw it, not, in person, but when I saw, your post, and, when you talked about how you wanted to go back, and then, you went into your dissertation, and when you finally posted and you said, I finally defended my dissertation, I was like, makes me, and when I read that post before I was joining the podcast, I was thinking, okay, if India can do it, then anybody can do it. And that's how I look at it.
That is so sweet of you, and thank you so much for bringing up that time. That was such a bittersweet moment, having to say goodbye to my mom and bury her. And then, that season, I think I pray that people can truly understand resilience when life is ugly. And when the dark cloud is over your head, like you talked about your battle with depression, and I'm so proud of you for how you've continued to fight that and beat that. And you're going to be such a powerhouse as a speaker, helping others with that. But I think of just at that time, I was not sure if I wanted to persist. But I remember my mom on her deathbed told me, she said, baby, promise me you'll get this doctorate for me. And I was like, oh, mom, goodness. And I was like, yes, ma'am. Still saying yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Still
ma'am.
saying yes, ma'am. And
Right.
Coach Fred. And so I just, when she passed, it felt like life gutted out of me. And I remember just laying across my bed and sobbing my eyes out because I had just finished my first first 3 chapters of the dissertation, and she was gone. But I told her, I said, Ma, I said, I did it. I'm halfway there, Ma, halfway there. And then through that low moment, I had a decision to make. And I think I want the audience to understand that when you're building grit and you're going for a goal, you're going to have some decisions to make along the way. And some of them are tough. And that one was tough as nails. And I decided I'm going to finish this, even though I felt like odds were stacked against me. I didn't feel like I had a great amount of self-efficacy to believe in myself because I felt some insecurities, as a writer, because my strength was in math, not necessarily in writing. And so even though, yes, I've written books, but I haven't written at that level. So, I had those insecurities, but I'm thankful for God's grace to get me through that time. And, I was able to dedicate that to my mom, and then also my father who had passed, and my sister. They all passed in that window of time. And so it was very easy to kind of not be gritty and to have an excuse as to why I could not be gritty. And I think that in society, sometimes that's what happens is people will say, oh, well, this happened to me. So of course, I can't persevere, And so I think that the reason why I've raised up this particular episode with you all is to talk to people about how to build up their ability to achieve in life when it seems like odds are stacked against them and their self-efficacy or their belief in themselves might be a little bit low. So with that said, I'm now going to transition back to Coach Fred and ask you to talk a little bit about your journey and how grit has helped you to believe in yourself and to have a greater sense of self-efficacy as you're accomplishing your goals in life.
Yeah, man, I will definitely tell you that when you feel like you're in a room or you're in a situation or you're in a company where there are people who you feel, again, just based on being human, they may have something different than I've got, and that's the reason why they're here. They're also looking at you.
Yeah.
And so in society, being a person of color sometimes in rooms where there have not been many of me has helped me just really understand that I am more than enough now that I am borrowing what my friend said earlier. I am more than enough. And so telling myself that I'm supposed to be there, I am more than enough.
I
What
love
is being what is being asked of me, and once I've got those three things in play, man, my goal was to outwork everybody. So if that meant that I got to work early, if I got finished with the project early, I made sure that I reached back out and said, "Hey guys, I'm done. Is it anything else that I can help
it.
you with?"
Wow.
And the more that I did
I love
that,
it.
the more confidence I had in situations. So when the next opportunity came for me to be in another room and at another level of management, another level of salesmanship, another level of whatever it is that I was choosing to do, I always wanted to be the person that was able to work efficient enough to get my stuff done and to reach back. I've got a painting in my office, and it's called "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother." And there's a gentleman out of Mobile, Alabama. He's the painter of that piece. And really what it is somebody who has already made it over the wall and did not forget that it's time to reach back and help your fellow brother or your fellow sister. So
Oh my word.
those are the things there, guys, that I have tapped into and I continue to tap into, and doors continue to open for
Yes.
me that no man can shut. And
Preach it.
hey, I'm living my best life.
Oh my gosh. There's so much you said in this that joined my heart, especially the reaching back. And I think that's why I intentionally am reaching back to Alexander, because I think he's going to just bombard stages and be amazing. And he already got his first taste of a stage at FCTM. And I'm hoping to open up more stages for you to come on board and to just share your expertise. And but I say that because we need more leaders, for those of you guys that are watching, especially those that have crossed over. You're over the fence, you're over the bridge, whatever. To reach back, not kick down. There is a culture that has been going on where people cross over and then they kick down. They get rid of you. They try to steal this, the opportunities, and that is so petty. For someone that is, and I'm telling you, for someone that has really made it, they are giving the energy of paying it forward. They're not reaching, they're not shutting people down, they're not kicking it down in the crack pot. They are trying to make sure you too can make it. This is why I really don't. I used to see people say, "Oh wow, they made it," but now I kind of look beyond that and I say, "Who did they help make it?" So I don't want to hear necessarily about just your greatness. I want to hear, how did you use your grit to build the next person or the person that's after you? That what did you do? I remember I told somebody about a TEDx talk and I gave him just a little bit of advice. Do you know he landed a TEDx talk and he just also defended his dissertation? And that is what I'm talking about, is how do you lead somebody into your shoe steps? How are you launching others and not pushing people down? I'm telling you, this culture, corporate America, just overall, it has to change. We have to understand there's more there's more blessings that come when you help others up. And I'm talking not being intentional, saying, okay, I'll help these three people up, but I know I was supposed to help that person and I leave them on the sideline because I'm worried that some foolishness is gonna, I don't know. People have stuff going on in their minds, but it's like, how do I intentionally help everyone up? I think that is a focus of a true leader. And it reminds me of Simon Sinek's book of Leaders Eat Last. You always put yourself last to make sure everybody else can win. Because ultimately, when you do that, you're going to win. And I hope that, even as you guys talk, I hope you guys can, connect afterwards. And, maybe there's some mentorship here because, Alexander, you're
Absolutely.
at Coach Fred, he's doing what you're wanting to do, and he's been in the space for years. He's an expert, right? And so I love how you're bringing that energy, Coach Fred. I just like your energy and I like your philosophy of how you want to outwork everyone in the room. And that takes grit because when people are coming in at 8:55, you're there at 7:30 because you understand the assignment. You understand the vision of whoever it is that you're leading and you're willing to, put in the extra effort. And so I commend you for that. Alexander, I'll let you talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to transition you guys to the next question that I have for you. Go ahead, Alexander.
So I just want to say, Dr. White and Coach, I really do appreciate the work that you guys do. It does not go unnoticed. That I just want to first and foremost say that because, when I was actually going on a fully in-depth tour of my school board building, and it was a graduation present from one of the school board members, and she was, showing me different spots that got a chance to meet my region superintendent and all that good stuff. But during my visit, what was really overpowering were I had teachers I've never even met who have worked within the school district who are now region superintendents, superintendent. And the first thing that my superintendent says to me was, remember, walk by faith and walk by sight. So in a sense, meaning that, and so, he's a very good, mentor who has kind of really, navigated me and I, there's so many people I could, list them all, but it's going to take more than just an hour to name them all. But, what I love the most about being able to be intent, because in order to be a proficient and professional education advocate, there's, and I say this, I call it the listening process. And the reason why I call it the listening process is because in order to be an effective advocate, especially for public education or whatever type of education activism you choose to do, you have to be intentional. You have to be a good listener, and you also have to have good judgment. And you have to do it in a way that's both articulate, but also in the sense that's understanding. And when I was in high school, I was on and off between an adult education center and a high school, and I was and I remember a phone call that I had with Dr. White, and I told her, I said, hey, listen, I said, Dr. White, I said, I don't know if I should get my GED or just a basic high school diploma. She basically said to me, she was like, okay, if I was you, just, go back to school and we'll help you through it. And here I am, a high school graduate. And, Dr. White is not more than just a person. Once you get to know her and you get to understand the story, I mean, in the sense, that, she, her journey was not easy. And so, she's actually helped molded, people to share their own stories, like how I shared my battle with depression. And, so it's not been easy, but, I tell you what, it has been the most rewarding privileges of my life to know people like Dr. White and you, Coach, because, I mean, yes, I am still young. My goal is to be an aspiring administrator. Somebody told me yesterday, oh, teachers don't make enough money. I simply turned my head and I looked back and I said, teachers may not make enough money, but I tell you one thing, they know how to motivate their students. Only a good teacher will motivate their students. It's like, a coach on a football field. You have to motivate your players if you want to receive that trophy.
Exactly.
So, and that's what it's about. And that trophy for my students would be that diploma.
And I want to say the return on investment for teaching is priceless. I recently was in a car accident, no fault of my own. As a result, I had to get physical therapy and massages, which, I'm not complaining about, but it is what it is. And lo and behold, I walk in to get physical therapy, and it's a former student. And I'm like, wow. He's like, Miss White. And I'm like, yeah, I see. But it's so cool because he's literally helping me to get better. So it's cool because we have these conversations and he talks about his experience, when he was a senior and how we as administration, we made the world of a difference for him. But the return on investment is priceless. I have students that are deputy sheriffs and just students that are in the nursing field, students that are realtors, students that are married, stable families, and it pays off to know that you actually had an impact on society in a great way because you did a great deed. So what you're saying is spot on, Alexander. And so I'll let you chime in a little bit, Coach Fred, and then I'm going to ask you to also tap into this next question of as we're transitioning, how has the GRIT framework? I want you to look at these pillars: growth mindset, resilience, self-efficacy, and time management. How have they helped you in your journey as the leader that you are today?
Alexander, if you want to go first, it's up to you.
Educator first, always.
Wow. I have never really looked at all these pieces put together to make up the framework. I mean, like all together. But each one of these, I cannot tell you how important it has been along my journey of going from classroom teacher to textbook sales rep to shifting from textbooks to technology, K-12 sales rep to management, and now doing some consulting work. Um, I cannot afford, if I look at my consulting business, I cannot afford to say, I don't know how to do something. I have to go and learn like AI. I'm telling you guys right now, nobody who's going to live the next 30 to 40 years should be saying, I hate AI. I don't want, I'm not going to have any part. So I'm letting the audience know we are going to move you from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And Fred's going to be right there with you because I am trying to master some of this newness, right? But what it does, guys and ladies, it gives us an opportunity to embrace, to stay relevant, and to have a place in a world that is constantly changing. Real quick, I don't know if you guys have paid attention to the news, maybe down in Florida where you guys are, but in Mississippi where my family is, and here in Georgia where I am, two of the largest paper mill factories are shutting down in communities where individuals have made their living with their hands. With their hands.
Huh.
And so as we transition out of this hands-on to a more digital world, we're going to see the need for print, the need for paper to shift into digital.
Yeah.
So now in my hometown, there are people that are literally saying, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Mm.
So if I was still in Mississippi and my mom had chose not to take us away, I probably would have been working at one of those factories, right?
Wow.
But because I've been able to escape that pattern that you see in small towns, I bet both of you can understand what I'm saying with having some small town connections, right? There are families that are being affected that I promise you the leaders of those companies knew that this was coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why not prepare these people for that change with getting them into some training and courses? I say that, right? I say that about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. We cannot afford to stay in a fixed mindset if you're going to survive.
Mm.
Okay?
Wow.
Resilience. Every day there is a force that's going to be pushing against us.
Right.
Think about this. Every day you get up and you put 10 toes down on the ground. But guess what? That same ground is pushing back up at you, and gravity is pushing from space onto you. So if you are going places, you have to have some resilience.
Wow.
If your feet are taking you places, you're gonna have to have some resilience. If not, you will be driven into the ground like a stake.
Wow.
Self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Self-efficacy, right?
Yes.
The belief that you are going to contribute to your space, your place, wherever you are for that given time, there is something in all of us that makes us different. And if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't all have different fingerprints, right? And toe prints and stuff, right? There's something in each of us that's there for us to make our mark on the world, even if it's just you putting your hands on it or putting your toes on it. No one else's matches yours, right?
Yes.
Time management. My best friend back in high school, Mr. Lanier Levitt, his dad was one of the first black morticians here in the state of Georgia who became a millionaire burying people. and
Oh wow.
so and so it was interesting having dinner at his house sometimes, right?
Oh yeah.
And listening to his dad and his mom talk, and his dad would take a break. Lanier and I would be over there kicking it a little bit, and he said, "Hey, do you guys know that when you're on time, you're still late?" I sat at that man's table enough to have dinner, to have dessert, and to get a chance to learn something that no one else in my house ever told me, even though I knew it. But this man who was a millionaire looked across the table and told his son and myself that on time is still late. And you know what happens? I show up early for everything.
Wow.
Because of Mr. Greg Levitt, Mr. Gregory Levitt. And so that is how those pillars of the framework have helped me shape my life, my pattern, my habits, my grind, my grit, and everything that makes me up.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so powerful with the work that you do now, being able to build grit in other leaders and, educators and, business leaders as a growth mindset coach. So I want to commend you for your work and thank you again for speaking to how the grit framework has helped you the most, Coach Fred. And so now, Alexander, go ahead and tag team on that. How has the grit framework? So speak to each pillar. How has it helped you, especially as a newly graduate or a new graduate from high school?
Well, first off, I have to, again, echo what Coach had said, because the way that I look at it is, first when I think of growth mindset, I think of, how am I able to grow beyond this? I don't know, especially in here in Hillsborough County, I know that throughout the schools in certain parts of the country have what's called 7 mindset schools,
Hmm.
which is focus on the seven growth mindsets. So and I'm very close with a friend of mine. Her name's Delia Gatson Yarbrough, who is who's an absolute rock star in her own right, who's a elementary principal here in Hillsborough County. But when I think of the seven, I call it the 7 pillars of growth mindset, or the 7 mindsets, however which way you take it. The first thing is that you have to have um, courage. You really have to make sure that you're devoting yourself into making sure that it's the saying, if they can do it, I can do it, in the sense meaning that we can do anything. We can harness grit, we can do anything at all, as long as we make sure that we put our mind to it.
I like
um
that.
and so what I'm reading here is by the way, I am using your website as kind of a guide, which outlines
Go for it.
the um the grit framework, and
Yeah.
one of them is self-management.
Okay.
Self-management in a sense meaning taking care of yourself, taking care of your own personal health. I mean, there have been days where I call them personal days. I mean, I know teachers take them, so I think students should honestly take one as well. Obviously, we can't just rely off of
I like that.
winter, fall, summer break. We can't rely on that, especially because if one fall break is a week, winter break is 2 weeks. But if you really was to really almost like professional develop, I honestly think if we have professional development for our teachers, maybe we should have some for our students, to outline the 7 mindsets,
Wow.
and to really make a change.
Hmm. Well, I can tell you as an author, and with some of the work I've done with Savvis, we will be helping students directly, just like you've spoken. So for those in the math
Absolutely.
space, You will
But
see.
to answer, the seven, or excuse me, not the seven other parts. Oh, excuse me, my computer sliding. I don't know why, because I don't have it on the mount.
The Gators
But
is fine.
what? But one of the things that there it goes again. So, long story short, one of the things that it's important to remember is that you obviously we've covered time management. In a sense, what I mean by time management is self motivating yourself. It really starts with making sure that as I said before, my jam, I call it my jam. I even listen to it now when I'm in the gym and I'm working out, and I think, oh, maybe I should, take a break. I'll pop in my earbuds and I'll listen to Eric Thomas while I'm working out. It's like a God that's not really a God, but it's like somebody speaking to you, and they're like, talking to you and they're saying, if I can do this, then I might as well because I have no choice but to do it. So, in the sense, I mean, and then, with resilience is key in life. And I've said this before multiple times, especially during FCTM. I've fostered resilience through my depression, and to the point where I actually had to, I'm actually on the verge of writing a book about my depression.
All right.
That
Let me
way,
know
I'm
today.
able to help other students because it's not just students that face depression. It is a nationwide issue that our students do not receive the proper mental health support that they need. I mean, we cannot rely off of school social workers to be there for our students. That's why I'm recommending
Ah,
that we do professional development for our students because
wow.
because a lot can change over a school year. It could be a death in the family. It could be a lot of things that are, kind of holding a student back from reaching that finish line. And so what, I met with a parent yesterday who was telling me that her child was going through some, who's going through some very troubling, situations. Obviously it was beyond my control, but, I at least was able to tell the student, and I gave them my contact information and, it was really empowering because this student was in the same shoes as I, had a low GPA, didn't want to try to, at least attempt to graduate, and they're a senior. I was like, there's got to be something that I can do to change them. I mean, I can't change them on the outside, but I can change their whole perspective on life on the inside. And so you have to, not just be self motivating to your students. And, coach, as you know, you're a former educator, so you know firsthand, what life is like in the classroom. And I know what it's like from a student lens perspective. But what really needs to, and this is something that I've even shared with my own school district, is that we cannot rely off of, just, telling our students, to do their work. I mean, obviously it's completely coherently dependent on if they want to get it done or not. But what we can at least do is take stock in that and say, you don't have I wouldn't say you were forcing them into doing it. That if you want a student to be truly successful, and if you want them to get that fully, that little diploma that they get at graduation, then there's got to be a change in growth mindset because obviously, as I said before, students can change. We could be on spring break one minute and they're not coming back into the classroom and we're being told, oh, they're not returning because of a family member's illness or because they have to take a leave of absence. The perfect example I can give is my sister. My sister, of course, is much older than me by 14 months, but she really persevered strongly because you have to have perseverance. You really have to have perseverance if you want to make a difference in society. Yes, I mean, it's totally up to the person you're talking to. Like if you're talking to an administrator, they'll think, okay, your concerns are valid. But if you go a step above them and if you go to, let's say, a principal and you're like, hey, wait a minute, my student is struggling. What can I do as a teacher to help them? And then your principal wants to say, wait a minute, you're the teacher, it's your responsibility. Because I hear this all the time, especially at my former high school. I get told all the time that teachers are not being paid attention well enough.
Mm,
So if you want to make a difference, it really starts off by self motivating your students. As I said before, by motivating your students, and I plan on doing this. I used to call it Growth Mindset Monday, in which my teacher every morning and forgive me, every
So
Monday and Friday at the beginning of the period we would watch Eric Thomas, and at the end we would watch Eric Thomas. That way, by the end of the period, we could understand that we were motivated. And so I think that if we were to tell our teachers, if you were to motivate your students, graduation rates would go up. We would have a ton of students. Here in Hillsborough County, which is the seventh largest school district in the country, with a budget of $3.3 billion, we should honestly take because if we had mental health services for our teachers, we should have the same thing for our students to make sure that they're not only just heard, but that our social workers and our psychologists are not just aware, but it's totally up to the student. But we have to make a difference.
mhm.
We as educators all know that, and I'm sorry if I keep using filler words, but as a future educator, I want to be able to take that little nuggets of wisdom that are given to me by former teachers who have been in the classroom longer than I've been born, or who have been around much longer, and use that as a pillar, and like have different signs throughout my classroom, specifically motivational quotes. I think by having motivational quotes in the classroom, along with the Eric Thomas videos, and telling your students, hey, let's make sure that we're doing the right thing. Let's make sure. I guarantee you, we would have a much better nation if we honestly did this.
Oh
It's
yes,
a so
yes, you would. And it's funny, I do everything you're saying, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're just confirming a lot of the great things that we're already implementing over here in the grit world. So for you rock stars, I do have a grit weeks where you start out growth mindset Monday, just like Alexander said, he's just confirming this. Then it's resilience Tuesday, self-efficacy Wednesday, time management Thursday, and then gritty Friday where you celebrate. So you do this already, and you'll see this if you order the grit calendar that is already embedded in the calendar. So for all of
love
you
it.
teachers and leaders that want, or you don't have to be in education, you can be in any background and use a grit calendar. But if you're wanting that, reach out to us. You can visit my website www.india-right.com. You can get it there.
If I do want to point out,
Yeah,
I
go
do
for it.
apologize.
Mhm.
So another thing is, in addition to what you're saying, is if you ever go to Dr. White's website, there is the Grit Workbook for students and for teachers.
Yes.
And I think that will really help, one, for our teachers. It will really, help them on how to not just manage a classroom, but also to provide, the nuggets of wisdom so they can then transfer it to the student. And it's the same thing with the workbook for students. I mean, I haven't been able to purchase it, but, what I've been able to hear from different students who have ordered the Grit Workbook. I actually have two former students who were my classroom, or excuse me, who graduated with me in the class of 25, who was able to read the Grit Workbook for students, and they were like, you know what, this, I had somebody tell me yesterday. I think it was a former friend of mine. She was like, or excuse me, not a former friend of mine. She's one of my best friends. She was like, maybe I'm pursued to go into education too. I said, well, I mean, everybody's mindset is different. Nobody's mindset is the same. And this is what I can say as this is that, especially, growth mindset Mondays, self-efficacy Wednesdays, and time management Thursdays and Fridays. I think that with time management and how you plan I look at my life as a big old, I look at it almost as a Bible in a sense, because there's so many chapters in it.
Mm.
But what I've understood throughout my life, as not just as an education activist, but as somebody who has, gone through public school, K through 12, I think that honestly, teachers do a fantastic job. And sometimes, our teachers are being underappreciated for it. We need to, raise awareness for our teachers. If we really want to make a difference in our students' lives, it all starts with, our school districts. If we want to make one of the, if we want to make a decision that's not just right for our students, but to guide them, I think, we would, honestly make a difference, but it, ultimately is up to not just the students, but also to the teachers as well.
I agree. And now that leads me to just have Coach Fred talk a little bit about this grit week and your opinions about using this grit week, among those that you're coaching or, other leaders, and just telling us, how you could see yourself implementing this.
Absolutely. I think Alexander mentioned a product and a program that I was so excited to be a part of. I didn't know that I'd ever get a chance to meet a student that was impacted by the work I did in Hillsborough with the company Seven Mindsets.
Yep.
And so for you to be, it's like full circle for me. And so I'm just taking a moment and taking that part in. Man, you have answered some of my life's work, right? And when Hillsborough came to us and said, "Hey, we've got an opportunity to go after this grant. Can you guys help us put a grant together to extend this Seven Mindset program to additional campuses?" I never did a grant that big before, but some
Yeah.
part of that grit is you don't say what you can't do, you put it together.
All
uh,
right.
but and so when I look at the framework, the weekly framework here, I'm like, all of those are just great um daily reminders of why we are here on Monday. If you come to school on Monday, if you come to your position, your job, your whatever you do on Monday with a growth mindset, you set yourself up for one of the most productive weeks. So I'm really digging growth mindset Monday. Um, Tuesdays, yeah, you're probably gonna have to put a little bit more pedal to the metal to keep things moving. So that resilience, I see it. So I'm picturing all of these, Dr. White. Self-efficacy Wednesday. Most people call that hump day, right? And that is a
Yep.
day. That is a day where you've got to dig in. And so I need some self-efficacy on Wednesday. And Thursday, hey, it's what is it? The eve of the weekend. Well, Friday
Yeah.
Eve.
Thursday.
Okay, Thursday is Friday Eve, so time management, because hopefully I have been productive, right?
Yeah.
And if there's any adjustments that I can make as I end my week, Thursday is a great day to look at, hey, what have I done? Are there some adjustments that I can make so that I can end Gritty Friday on a high note? So these are awesome. These are awesome, and I can't wait to purchase my calendar so that I can put it up in my office and I can get gritty on Friday.
Yes.
Yes. And so, I mean, really, Coach, you were very much spot on. And, here's the thing now, when obviously I'm not, my high school didn't do the seven mindsets, but obviously some of the schools in Hillsborough, like G.I.T Elementary, that are part of the seven mindsets, know firsthand exactly, I mean, they do a fantastic job. And, the principal, Dilly Gatson, who's now over at Muller, really does do an excellent job. I do also want to point out that, um, when I said earlier a quote by my godmother, which is never give up on your dreams because you'll never know when that dream is realized. When I was able to walk across that stage, I was like, yes, I finally did it. Here I am, off to do great things in college. And somebody was actually somebody who actually watched my graduation called me, after watching one of our episodes, and they called me and they said, "Well, I just got done watching you graduate high school." And I was like, "Okay, that's a little strange because they didn't." Because I was like, "Okay, who told you what happened?" The whole shebang. And so he was actually the chapter president for Phi Beta Sigma.
Ah, okay.
Those, which is a huge leadership fraternity,
Mhm.
and they work very closely with Zeta Phi Sigma as well. So when and I told my therapist, I said, I'm thinking about rushing, to be a Sigma. The first thing she said was, "Are you sure?" I said, "Here's the thing now. I said, even though 3 of my teachers will become my frat brothers, which is, kind of off, but, in the same token, though, you know, um, I have to tell you, I've probably, even though, my journey is not done, I feel like I've, more to give. And, you know, when I first met Dr. White, I think I was 14 and a half going on 15 years old. And I was, and, on our, our first episode, she was, sharing a little bit about her journey, from a homeless shelter to a dorm overnight. That really, was kind of like, me in the sense, from being, diagnosed with depression, and, they were not knowing if I was actually going to graduate high school or not. And I finally was like, you know what? And I remember as a, my godmother, who's a state representative up here in the Florida legislature, she told me, she was like, just get it done. And, me and her really had a full, hardcore, in-depth conversation. And I told her, I said, look, I will get it done for you. What other advice would you give me? She goes, honestly, pursue your dreams, because you're young and you have to have persistence if you want to get something done to be that change maker that I know you can be.
That's the
And
truth.
so here I am, 19 going on 20, and, going to be an educator, and then, off to UF or USF. I haven't really decided yet. Officially, I may go to UF to be a Gator. Because I know that's always been a passion for Dr. White, because,
Yes.
like I said, she's been a huge part of my life, and, she's, there's just so much that I can say that are going to be exceeding past the 1 hour mark. But as I said before, it's a huge blessing to, and I call you guys, part of my tribe. I have a lot of people who I work with who oftentimes who often doubt me, saying, oh, just because, you're a student, you don't understand what life is like as an educator. I may not know what a life is like as an educator, but I've seen it firsthand as a student enough to know the struggles that our teachers face.
Mm.
Mm.
Wow.
And I've met with teachers who have been in the county, 30 plus years, who are, barely making enough, money, because let's face it, teachers don't make enough money. That's obviously, but, when I met with a union member who serves for the Hillsborough County Classroom Teachers Association, who's a widow. Okay, she's has 3 amazing children, all who attend public school, and she's working 4 jobs
Wow.
and barely
Wow.
having enough time to see her own children.
Mm.
And so, to help foster through grit, we honestly have to foster to understand that, students, my advice to you is, don't ever self-doubt yourself. That is probably one of the biggest things that you can do or not do, is to make, but, long story short, you have to make a difference if you want to get something done. Whether it's, joining a club, or, even if it's something as, joining your school's beautification club, which is, not picking up trash, but, making sure that our, campus is, not just safe, but also making sure that, our school is well attended to, that, there's no issues. But, you know, as I said before, I look up to you, India, and you know this. You've always been that steadfast hand at the wheel to understand, and you've given me some good judgment over the last couple of years that I really have, taken into account very seriously. And one of the things that I often thank you for is not just being a part of my life, but also being that guide and giving me the nuggets of wisdom to be that educator.
Well, I'm proud of you, and I know you're going to exceed my expectations because you're very gritty. And I think I've seen you go from being uncertain to gritty and to making things happen. And so it makes me proud to know you and to just be a little nugget in your journey of excellence. And to know that, we're passing the torch to greatness because I see it in you for sure. So
Thank you.
again, thank you. And so I'll let you guys wrap up now. Coach, if you can wrap up with some final words, maybe about grit or just whatever you want to tell the audience. We'd love to hear from you as we wrap up this session.
Yeah. I did not know what I was in store for. And I want to tell Alexander that him being here and hearing his story helps me, because I'm moving into career fair, and I go into the high schools normally, and I go and I speak to young people during this time of year, probably going into Thanksgiving. I'll be in and out of different high schools, and usually it is a very scripted. Okay, I know I've got this group for 30 minutes or this group for 45 minutes, and I stick to the script. But
Yeah.
if he doesn't mind, I am going to tell more young people this year about the grit that this young man has demonstrated in his journey. And I'm going to tell them about Dr. White, because Alexander has been doing something that so many people wait to do. They wait until those teachers pass away, and then they bring flowers to a funeral home. But one of the greatest things that I've seen you do, young man, is that you're giving your teacher her flowers now. And I am so impressed, and I am so privileged to be a part of this podcast with you, that I am going to share your story wherever I go now, speaking into these schools, and ask them to consider bringing a young person in to speak. So that is part of that. Remember, we talked about reaching
Yes.
back. That is my commitment to you, my friend. And it's just a seed that I am going to sow in your life, your career, your journey, because the fact that I am here in a position to be able to do that at this time, and it's in my heart to do that, I know I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with that resilience, pushing back to make the world
Yep.
a better place, my friend. So
That
And
is
thank you, Frank.
I
That really
I am
does,
I'm
that
so
does hit at home for me.
I'm so grateful, man, to see you honor your teacher the way that you've done with Dr. White, man. Just that's what I want to close on.
And if I may make a few closing remarks as well, Dr. White, first off, Frank, thank you again for those kind words. Those really did hit at home for me because here I am, approaching college. I mean, I start, in just a matter of weeks, and so I actually had a friend of mine who I was very close with, who unfortunately lost his life before he was able to graduate, and as a wish, because obviously, I was not graduated at this point. And I told him, I said, if there was anything at all that you want me to do, what do you think I should do? He goes, well, he's like, two things. I want you to make sure that, you graduate high school, but also I want you to carry on your teacher's legacy through you.
Mm,
And so, and so it's very unfortunate that, he could not be here, but I know that he's here physically and spiritually with me. And, because originally I was a political science major. Originally I was going to go, into politics and then, go into pre-legal studies and then, get my law degree. When I had went to FCTM, it really changed the whole trajectory of my life. It really did. Just, not just seeing the different vendors from Texas Instruments, which was really surprising, And I remember telling, I was like, oh my God, like it was just like a huge ballroom with like different, mathematicians. And I was like, boy, it was like, like you take a child to Disneyland for the first time and they go through that, through Sleeping Beauty Castle, with like, oh my God, a carousel, but it was what I found incredibly rewarding from it was meeting teachers, especially not just from my school district, but meeting teachers from Georgia, from California, all over the state of Florida and beyond. And of course, Dr. White introduced me to some of her colleagues, either from Sabas or and it was really inspiring because I grew up off of this Sabbath learning curriculum. So it
mm.
was it was like, okay, they're not just they're the main authors who write our textbooks for throughout the state of Florida, and I was really intrigued by that. And what also I have to say, Frank, is that I appreciate you tremendously for the work that you do, and I look forward to connecting with you and just really becoming involved. And because as a future teacher, I'm going to need your nuggets of wisdom so I can be that amazing educator, because I know it really, you know you're going to need several different, I call it peer coaching in a way. Like, you help me, I help you.
Yeah.
Like, in a sense. And, if you're ever in Florida, I highly strongly invite you to the FCTM conference this upcoming year in 2026. And, not just speak with our teachers, but, it's not up to me, it's up to the council directly. But, long story short, I think by, just, you sharing your story and, how you came to be this amazing educator. And, same thing for Dr. White. Obviously I've known you for almost 5 years. And, what I've found incredibly rewarding in this process is that we as educators often, need to motivate our students. And I feel like you've not only been that extra push, but you've also been that guide to like, okay, Alexander, enough, fooling around on social media at 11 o'clock at night. Time to get this essay done. So she was, and, she really has been a huge, huge part of my life. And it's the same thing for you, Frank. Even though I've only met you, just in a short amount of time, an hour and 20 something minutes, you really have, changed not just my trajectory on, what I want to do in life, but also, being able um, to be that person. And, you've really been the steadfast hand at the wheel for, the people of Georgia and throughout your home state of Mississippi. And I know that you've done your home state proud, and I know you've done the Peach State very proud. And I applaud you again for your amazing work and advocacy.
Well,
Thank
this is
you.
this is fabulous, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'm thankful for both of y'all and for the work that you're doing and what impact you're going to have in the future. And I'm so humbled and honored to be a part of you and to be connected. And so thank you so much for sharing with the audience those last nuggets. With that said, guys, thank you again for joining me on the Let's Get Gritty podcast. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. If you guys want to reach Alexander, can you give us some contact as to how people can reach you?
Yes. So my email is Alexander B
Mm-hmm.
as in boy Rivera Rivera 61 at gmail.com. My telephone number is 813-860-3678. I'm available to you Monday through Friday from 8:30 in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the evening, because after 5 o'clock, I'm out. So, but my work will continue on even after those hours posted. So if you are a teacher, if you're a student, if you're even a coach who wants to give me some nuggets of wisdom, I'm open to receive your your wisdom and your expertise. Just know that I'm here for you. And again, a few remarks for my students. I wish you a very successful school year. Whether it's you're going back or you're currently going into your third week of school, just keep pushing. If you're a senior, congratulations on achieving your last year of public school. Now the real work begins after you graduate. For my teachers and administrators, thank you every single day for the work that you do. It does not go unnoticed. And finally, to Frank and India, thank you again for having me on tonight and really being able to share my expertise with all of you. And I look forward to working with you, Frank, in the future as we navigate through my advocacy journey as an advocate and as a teacher.
Well, thank you, Alexander, for your sweet words. And Fred, I now want you to get on Coach Fred and just kind of share.
I mean, Fred, why do I keep calling you Frank?
No, no, no. You want to know why? I know it sounds crazy, but look, Alexander, if there's ever any name that I get called more, is Frank. And guess what? My dad's father's name was Frank Bridges. So I'm wondering, did I come back reincarnated like as
It's
Frank
weird.
Bridges?
Here's the weirdest thing. I literally all I
It's
like when I
okay.
was sitting here and I got an email from a guy named Frank. I was like, wait a minute.
It,
Why do I keep calling this guy Frank? It's like it's like a sign coming through.
I love it. I no. That just means that my ancestors are
Right.
all over me. They're around me, and I'm
Amen.
embracing that. Yes, that's a good thing. No, I am again so grateful for again just this opportunity. I just want to share real quick that my work in the area of growth mindset stretches broad. I mentioned K-12. That is an area that I'm dedicated to wholeheartedly. But also, I have a heart project that allows me to also encourage those that are in healthcare and wellness support. So that's a whole nother pillar of my program. And then lastly, I know you guys are not going to believe this, but sales. So I have a growth mindset program for all of sales, and in particular, automotive. Guess what? I've never had any experience selling cars, right?
Right.
I went into a car dealership and I was the top salesperson for 12 months straight. Can you guys believe that?
Oh my
Yes.
word! Wow.
Yes, because I was able to understand where I was, what were the challenges in front of me, and quickly master how can I be different than every other person that was just trying to sell a car. And so you can reach me at my email address is fred at sellingtechniques.com. We're gonna fix that. But
And
my
can you
phone
go back
number,
to the email?
but if you text me 678-908-9354, I will send you my signature with all of that information. Awesome. Thank you, Dr. White.
Oh yeah.
So
Now what's the number again?
yes, 678
Mm-hmm.
908
Mm-hmm.
9354. And just like Alexander, I am available up to a certain time, which is usually 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. But if you need me and something comes across your mind and you really want to bounce something off of somebody, hey, you can text that number anytime. But I'm kind of like Big Red from the Five Heartbeats. My office hours are from, but it's all
Right.
good. If you're part of Dr. White's tribe, I will definitely take a call from you if you need me. But I am just so grateful to be able to share with you guys who I am, what I'm doing, and now that I'm a part of the Dr. India White tribe and the Gritty family, man, I feel like I'm gonna be looking for an invitation to the family reunion, you know?
Yeah.
Right? It seems like it. And,
But no, it's been great. It's been great.
Guys so much.
and
This has
Fred,
been fabulous, and I will
before we
definitely
close,
have this on all of the main social media channels, guys. As you see, my channels are listed there. Check out the website again. And again, like I said, guys, no matter what, take grit with you, okay? And so with that said, guys, stay gritty. See ya.